Hello, everybody. It is Jason Hennessey, and I'm with two of my colleagues, Brandon and Kate. Welcome to our first official live webinar. This is a very exciting. Um, this is a very
Sorry about
exciting
that.
time for us. We've got a lot of good insights that we're going to be sharing with you today about analytics and what your data is trying to tell you. Um, we're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to hop on. I see people joining in right now. So we'll give everybody just maybe another minute or two to log on. And then, we'll get this started. And in the background, as we're going through this, we want this to be a very collaborative uh, webinar where if you have questions, you don't have to wait till the end to ask questions. You can kind of pose your questions as we're going through this. This is it's not every day you have Brandon and Kate on a call like this. Brandon is a guru in analytics, and Kate is just phenomenal with data and conversion rate optimization. And collectively, they make up our team here internally at Hennessey Digital. I'll say hi to a couple people that are popping in right now. It looks like Priscilla is on the line. Hi, Priscilla. She publicly said that. It looks like we've got Larry, Alan, Gina, Shannon, Alexis. People are just popping in from all over the country. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and we hope that you do get some real value from this. And if there's a question that you've been pondering about analytics that you haven't been able to address because it is very confusing, think about that and be sure to pose it. We might be able to get into that. So we'll give you guys another minute or so to check in, and then we'll get started here. By the way, I'm calling in from Los Angeles, and both Kate and Brandon are in Austin, Texas. What's the slogan there?
I'm not sure. There's a lot of tacos.
Keep Austin weird, I think.
Keep Austin weird. That's it. Yes. Keep Austin weird. See a lot more people jumping on last minute, so we'll give you guys another 30 seconds, and then we are showtime here. All right, so as the last few people jump on here, one of the things I do want to mention is we are live. There will be a recording of this, so if you do hop on late and you're not seeing this right now, but you're watching it later, welcome. This will be recorded. The video will also be shared with those that registered. If you are on Twitter, or on Instagram, we are using the hashtag DataDive. Amber will put that in the chat there for those that are on Twitter or Instagram or even Facebook or LinkedIn, wherever you're tweeting this stuff. All right, so let's get started. First of all, it gives me great pleasure to be on this call today with two of our colleagues here. So Brandon Caballero is our Director of Analytics. He's been working with us for about 1.5 years now, I'd say. And he just kind of came in and just completely took over analytics. And where there was chaos, he created organization. And he's just, like I said, a guru on all things analytics. And so we're going to get into that. And then I also have Kate Willis. And Kate Willis is she's a data analyst here at Hennessey Digital, but she has a core competency and a specialty in conversion rate optimization. And so Kate and Brandon work together on a daily basis for some of our clients. And so by all means, if you guys have questions for them, please pop them in. So without further ado, Brandon, did you want to share the screen? And I'm just going to set this up. So, me personally, I'm an SEO guy, and SEO is half of the equation, right? Driving traffic to a website, right? That's one piece of it, right? But what do you do when the traffic comes, right? How do you measure it? How do you monitor it? How do you try to improve the conversion percentages, right? And so your data is truly trying to tell you something. And in this webinar, we want to kind of get into that. So Brandon, let's maybe kick this off and let's get into this data.
Okay. So one of the things that, or let me just go over these. So today we'll be covering just overall implementation, some common problems we see, reporting, and then move into analysis. One of the things that Jason mentioned was just overhauling the analytics platform. One of the first things that we did, coming in, was we went through every single website and changed the way analytics was implemented. So that'll be what we're covering first. So there's basically two ways to implement Google Analytics across the site. For the most part, when we started, everything was hard-coded on the site. So you create your analytics account, you go in and add the snippet to every single page. But then things grow, you need to track conversions, track events, things like that. There's other marketing pixels on the site that talk back and forth with analytics. So we went with Google Tag Manager, which is, in my opinion, the best way to implement an analytics platform across your websites. We put the analytics snippet inside of Tag Manager, replaced it across all the sites, started moving marketing pixels in there and things like that, and really cleaned up the analytics implementation across the board.
Brandon, can I ask questions as you go?
Sure.
So what is the big difference between like Tag Manager? I guess what is the bigger benefit between setting it up with Tag Manager versus just putting the snippet on the actual site? And
if you're just going with the basic Google Analytics implementation and you put the snippet on the site, there really isn't a difference.
Okay.
But once the Tag Manager, you put the snippet on the site, and when it's time to, say, add an event based on a certain page or a certain action that the user takes in Google Tag Manager, you won't have to go to a developer. You can just go in and set up a rule that says fire this event. And then, like we were saying about the multiple marketing pixels, we have, you have your Facebook pixel, you're firing Facebook events, you might have a LinkedIn Insights tag, UET tags for Bing, you have your paid search efforts, and say something as simple as, hey, I want to fire, events or conversions for all these platforms based on a single action. Well, without Tag Manager, you go in and set up that event, or set up those multiple events 4 times. Well, with Tag Manager, you create the one action of this is what was taken, and then you just tie all the events to it, and you can use that one trigger. So Tag Manager really helps actually clean up the code on the site by moving it all into a single container that makes it easier to access and change and stuff like that.
And I think too, like as far as Tag Manager goes, I request events all the time. Click events on the phone number, on CTAs, on just things I think users might be interested in, or users aren't interested in, but maybe they're clicking because they think it's a button or something like that. So I'll request that these events get tagged. And if it was something that you had to go and put it on every single time on the site, or to change it if something changed on the site. Tag Manager just makes it easier just across our team.
And I'd be willing to bet there's probably people even on this call that this is the extent of what they do, is they just basically add the snippet of code, and a lot of people might not even realize that you should be tracking it with different tags for different events, for goals, and and there's so much more that comes with this. So all right.
So once we get analytics onto the site, just the most basic installation, having it on every single page. A lot of our clients already have analytics set up. So one of the first things that we do for people that we're not, creating an analytics property for is do like a full audit of their analytics property. So for the most part, over on the right-hand side, you see like this small list of things. We actually use like an 82-point checklist to go through all the different settings and features and stuff for analytics. But we're not going to cover all of those today. I just highlighted some of the things that I see or have seen across pretty much not all of our clients, but a lot of our clients. One of the big things one of the big things that I fix first are the conversions. These are the goals inside of analytics. It's the actions you want your users to take. So if you have something like an e-commerce store, obviously making a purchase, signing up for a newsletter, things like that. Now on a lead gen site, what we see most are, form submissions or phone calls, things like that. Some common problems that we see with goals are that they've added a goal to just a contact us page or where somebody lands. And that's not really something where you're gathering information. The user really isn't doing anything. They're just landing there. So you'll have like an overinflated conversion rate. Another thing that we see is instead of if a form doesn't go to a thank you page and it just alerts the user that they've submitted it correctly, we just have people tracking clicks on buttons. So if they were to leave out information and click submit and the form doesn't actually go through, if you're only tracking that button as the goal to click on it, that didn't really happen. So we fix a lot of goals. We turn off ones like we were saying earlier where the user's just landing on a page, or if you have a lead gen site where you've turned on goals for time on site or page views for sessions, sometimes those aren't really relevant to the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Other things like a 0% bounce rate is something we see a lot. This is usually when somebody has tagged on the site multiple times. They're firing events that are just a user has seen something without making it non-interactive, meaning that it is excluded from the bounces. And then let's see, other things that we see, multiple properties. A lot of our clients have different agencies working with them for different things, and they'll want their own property on it. So we usually find the root property, make sure that works for all the different vendors and the client, and clean that up.
Hi, Brandon, real fast, just because you mentioned bounce rate, I'm not sure if you're going to get into that in much detail. I do have a question about that. So a lot of times, we work with, a lot of attorneys, right? And so sometimes attorneys will come to us and they're like, hey, I'm really concerned, my bounce rate is really high, right? And so I don't think that they know how, in most cases, they don't know how bounce rate is kind of measured, right? And so if somebody does a Google search for something like dog bite lawyer in Austin, right? And they land on a page and they're on that page and they called the person and now they're on the phone for 15 minutes, but they haven't gone anywhere else. The way that Google tracks bounce rate and they close out, would that be considered a bounce because they didn't go anywhere else? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So if you have a good example would be a Google My Business page. So somebody clicks through the GMB listing, they see the phone number, they call, or maybe they write down the address. That would normally be a bounce. We use call tracking, so that cuts back on some of the bounces for a phone number or something like that. And, writing down an address isn't something you can really control, but going back to Kate and adding events and stuff like that, we tag external links or clicks on Google Maps and stuff like that. So that would be excluded from a bounce.
Got it.
Just rates in general, occasionally we'll get questions like, hey, is my bounce rate good? And it's like, well, that's, relative to your site.
Yeah, because like an e-commerce website, the goal is if they're just on a product page and they didn't get through to like the checkout, right? A high bounce rate is really bad. But in some cases, if you're a lawyer, sometimes you don't have to really even pay too much attention to that, because if it's addressing the query and they're actually calling you and you set it up that way, it's not really a major concern. So
even if you do have a high bounce rate, the thing to really look at is when it fluctuates. So like if your bounce rate is 80% all the time, and then all of a sudden it's 95, it's like, okay, now now I message Kate to, look at what's happening and what the users are doing to see what the problem is.
Yes. Well, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you addressing that question.
And then let's see, UTM parameters are a big one. Those are great and should be used for pretty much everything outside your site. So Facebook ads, tag your email campaigns. If you have third-party sites that are placing links for you, we use those so that you can say, oh, this is the so-and-so campaign. This email went out on this date. It was from Campaign Monitor. But a problem that we see is some clients will take these UTM parameters and they'll put them on the hero area or something like that. They're like, we want to know if this campaign is working. But what that does is you come to the site through one source, say it's organic, you click on that internal link with the UTMs on there, and now it breaks the session and it's tagged as coming to the site through, hero image one. So that's one of the things that we look for on a client site.
And we'll even actually add UTM parameter. So a UTM parameter, for those that are listening that might not understand what that means, that's where if you do like a Google search and you click on something and it actually has like a long string after the URL, right? It has question marks and numbers and UTM, right? So that's a UTM parameter, and that's specifically so you can track things and attribute that traffic to specific like campaigns, like Brandon said, Facebook or whatever else. But what I want to say with that is, like, we'll even go to the extent of creating a UTM parameter for even Google My Business for each of the different locations, so that we know where the traffic is coming in from, like a Google My Business, and attribute that. Is that right?
Yes, our local search team has put in a lot of work over the last few months. Before we were doing just GMB as the campaign, and we got more clients that have multiple locations. They did a little bit of research. They found the best tagging methods for these. So now, if you pull up one of our clients and you look at, say, their GMB listing for Austin, and you click on that link, it's going to say Google Organic GMB-Austin, website versus appointment versus phone call.
Which then goes into call tracking metrics, which people should have, whether it's call tracking metrics or call where or whatever else. Then you should also be tracking it there too, if that actually prompts a phone call. Yes. Yeah.
And then I included referral exclusion just because this happens not as often, but it's a huge deal. So we have, I think, maybe 3 or 4 clients that have their form submissions get processed off-site. So you fill out a form, it takes you off-site, it confirms it, and then sends you back to the thank you page. Well, one of the things that happens with that is now all of your goals are showing up as coming from, Captor or some other service, whereas they actually came in organically. So the referral exclusion list is just a place where you can go and say, hey, let's exclude, all traffic, or not exclude, let's take all traffic that comes from this source medium or this URL and drop it, and then it uses your original source medium that you came to the site.
Got it.
Yeah, and I'll just pipe in and say that, like, it's very important that Brandon and his team, they go through all these things, because it makes it really hard to look at sessions if they're broken across the thing because of UTM parameters or because of referrals. So if I'm trying to, one thing, for CRO, we like to look at things as a collective. So something Brandon will discuss in a little bit is content grouping, and we'll go through that and group maybe keyword searches or something like that, how users come to the site as a collective. And it helps you just look deeper into the data and really, really, really understand your users and how groups of users move through the site, more than just new versus return. So
all of this data, like that's, a lot of times there's so much data between, analytics and search console, right? And using that data to then feed your organic SEO strategy or your pay-per-click campaign, right? Because I some of the things that, what you guys do is even above my pay grade, right? And some of the reports that you guys are generating, where you're actually exporting all the keywords and then grouping them based on, are they informational queries? Are they transactional queries, right? And so some of that stuff really blows my mind when you guys are kind of like forensically scrubbing and auditing the data like that.
Okay. So next, let's see. Next, we're going to go into reporting. And so after we get all the data, there's multiple ways to report and multiple things that still need to be done. I'm going to kind of go out of order here. Annotations, I think, is one of the bigger ones that doesn't often get used.
It's so important.
Yeah, these are just like little small things, or in analytics, it's a little small thing where you can go in, you can add 160 characters, basically like a tweet, and then set a date of something that happened. We like to track any type of external event that happens in your analytics so that we can like monitor ups and downs. We recently had a client, all their metrics were doing great, but their organic traffic had dropped. And we looked into that, and because we had annotations, it turns out that they had just started, or they had just ended a huge radio and TV campaigns. And these campaigns were being turned on and off and on and off over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks. We, like Jason said, we dug into Search Console, looked at that same period, and we noticed that as soon as those TV campaigns and radio campaigns were turned off, impressions for their brand name had dropped, and that's where the the traffic decrease was. So for annotations, we definitely recommend adding any external events or campaigns that you're running, even if you do something like put up a billboard. Another good one for the CRO team is the major redesigns on the site, optimizations to certain pages, rebuild, something that we're really big on, things like that.
Yeah, anything that would help us make sure the data that we're using to analyze, optimization efforts, test efforts, anything like that is just clean, and we're not using data that it's not dirty data, but it's just polluted in a sense. And you just want to make sure if you don't know what's going on, outside of the website, but it very much so affects the website and your traffic and your conversions, then it makes it very hard to optimize and kind of progressively just improve everything if there's a lot of moving parts. So it's really good to just try and keep those annotations in there, make sure you're making everyone aware of things happening, and then it makes it.
Okay. And then next would be your channel settings. Pretty much every single session that comes into analytics is split into source medium groups. So if you come through Google Organic, that's a source medium. Being Organic, an email campaign, all of these are split by source medium. And Google by default has 9 different channels that they dump all your traffic into. So like organic search includes Bing, Google, DuckDuckGo, things like that. Well, what it doesn't do is split out things like social. So while paid search and organic search are already split out, if you're investing heavily into, say, social media, you have basically your organic results where somebody talks about you, you have promoted posts, you have paid ads and things like that. You would have to go in and create those channels. So altering the channels that are already there is something that you should do just starting out.
Good stuff.
Following that, the content grouping is something I think that Kate was just mentioning. So some of our sites have thousands of pages and things like that. You might have a frequently asked questions category where you have hundreds of individual pages for each of these. Well, when you look into analytics and you're trying to see if somebody went from one page to another page or track their journey or path, what you want to do is put these into groups. Somebody like Kate doing an analysis of what users are doing, if they're landing on 50 different ask question pages, those appear as individual pages. So the content grouping puts those into little buckets. With, you can do it based on URLs or on the site, stuff like that. I used to do a lot of paid search analytics for multifamily unit houses and the auto industry. So one thing that we did was, if a car is above a certain value, let's group all of those vehicles into, a high dollar group of vehicles versus the lower ones. Because looking at the bounce rate on, say, all of your vehicles differs if you're going from, a $20,000 car versus a $200,000 car. So content grouping is really great for things like that. Let's see. The next thing, Data Studio and Google Sheets are 2 tools that we use a lot. For the most part, if you want to look at something simple or if you want data shown a certain way, going into analytics it's cumbersome sometimes and it's hard to move things around. Data Studio is a great way to pull only the metrics and dimensions that you care about. You can blend things together. You can share those reports, schedule them to be sent, add multiple pages. It's a way of pulling everything that you want out of analytics and then looking at it in a way that you want. Google Sheets also is something we use a lot. The Google Analytics plugin for Google Sheets and the Search Console plugin that we use, it really allows us to manipulate data when we're doing calculations and stuff like that. It's a great reporting tool for just working with the numbers in general. Let's see. Segments and views are something that come up a lot. Occasionally we'll get clients who will want to create additional views for, say, mobile traffic or desktop, or if somebody landed on a certain page. We really recommend against that, just because when you create separate views, then you have to go back in and recreate your goals. You might have different filters, there's settings on it. So now you're looking at a subset of the data that might not be correct compared to your overall thing. So segments is something that we recommend using instead of creating a different view each time you want to look at something. Those segments can be very advanced. You can look at people, let's say you can look at new users that came to the site organically through mobile devices and landed on a certain page. And that will be something that you can turn on and off. You can compare it against other segments, different channels. And then if you have a paid search team, you can take those same audiences, or sorry, those same segments and create audiences based off of those to advertise to.
And segments are something in CRO that I use all the time for tests, for doing the audit, for understanding the, I'm sorry, my dog is barking. Understanding just the site, like users as a whole, you know, did they come through using a keyword, like I said, so content grouping, it's all very much connected throughout the whole thing. So.
And let's see, the very last one I have is if you're looking at your analytics is, and I think I read this on it may have been Optimize Smart or something like that, but when you're looking in analytics and trying to figure out, you know, like if you're doing well and stuff like that, pairing certain KPIs together is a must. So Kate does conversion rate optimization, and one of the things that comes up in a lot of meetings is, oh my God, my conversion rate dropped. So the first thing we do is we start digging in and notice it's like, oh, but your goals have increased or your leads have increased over the same time period. And it's like, what happened? So then we'll dig a little bit deeper, and it's like, okay, you're starting to rank because our SEO team is so awesome. Now you're ranking for all these keywords and impressions, and so that huge spike in traffic, you know, it hasn't started converting yet because we haven't did anything CRO wise. So that huge spike in traffic, you know, that's why your conversion rate's down, but your leads are still up. It's something, you know, it's a good thing. So
yeah, let me jump in there for just a second. So what you just mentioned is so important, right? Because as you're doing good SEO, let's just say, you know, you have content that you we've actually done SEO like so good in certain cases where one of our clients, an old blog post started to rank on the first page of Google for the term Best Buy, right? This is one of our clients. And so all of a sudden they got all these impressions, but their conversion rate looks like it dropped dramatically, right? And it's just because of all of the good SEO that you're doing with the links and the content and the technical, it pushed a page up onto the first page. Now, Google recognized that query, like that page didn't satisfy the query of somebody looking for Best Buy, but you just saw these huge spikes in organic traffic and impressions, right? Where it kind of threw everything off. And when you're looking at conversion rate optimization, it's like, man, we got all this extra traffic, but none of it converted, guys. What's going on? And it's just, you know, like occasionally that happens after doing this. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just adding to that, Jason, and also what Brandon was saying, just really understanding the traffic and not just the ups and the downs. And, oh, this is great, we have a ton of traffic. It might not be the right traffic, though. So maybe that's not why it's converting. Or a lot of times you clean up SEO or you clean up your traffic and you see it just, you know, plunge in it. And a lot of times people start, you know, really panicking. But it's actually, it's a good thing because your conversion rate's going up because it's the right traffic.
That's
and
right.
It's just a time. Sometimes it takes time for you to actually, you know, see that come to fruition, but it usually does. And it's just the ups and the downs are a lot of times not something to freak out about. And it just takes a little digging.
Yes, agreed. Good point, guys.
That's kind of a great segue too when Kate mentioned the right traffic, because one of the things that came from her asking that question was the classification project that you just mentioned earlier, Jason. So like we have 20,000, a client ranking for 20,000 keywords, and then all of a sudden we see shifts in traffic and in positions and stuff like that. And my first thought is, oh no, what happened? So I'll go look into it. And it's like, oh, you dropped for all these random questions, like, why do I have to wear my seatbelt or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
We started processing queries for the entire month into these different categories. Like you said, like, oh, these are just research questions versus, brand versus pertinent. This is what we want to rank for. So, and that kind of leads into the next slide where Kate's going to go over some CRO stuff.
Got it.
Yeah, so if y'all don't know what CRO is, it's conversion rate optimization. We've said multiple times. I know it's a newer field, and a lot of people, think it's just testing. It's let's change this button color, let's change this. Oh, I have a lot of traffic. And they just see like a slight improvement, but it's a lot more. Or just just heat maps. It's so much more than that. It's so much more in depth than that. Those things are great tools and things that give you a lot of insights into users. The heat maps, show you how far people scroll down the page. And then, with that, you get the data for where they're clicking. And this is outside of analytics. One thing with Hotjar or Crazy Egg is sometimes that data is sampled. So it's still really good to make sure you have, your back and you're covering all your bases with your click events and analytics. You can never have enough data, but so CRO is just, you want your qualitative, your quantitative. So your qualitative heat maps, your session recordings, user tests are great for feedback. It's just whether or not your users want to opt into that. And then you have your quantitative, which is everything Brandon has just kind of talked about, and making sure you've got your click events, your phone tracking, your phone call tracking, your form submissions, making sure they're actually submitting. And then just your content grouping just to get a little bit more out of analytics. Because analytics is a great tool, but there's a lot more ways to, manipulate that data to tell a different story. But yeah, I guess I feel like as far as CRO goes, a lot of times people, I guess common questions I get is, what if I don't have enough traffic to test? But CRO is not just testing, not just A/B testing. That is, I think, in my opinion, the best part about CRO, because it's hard data. It's hard evidence that something's working. It's not a guess. It's not an assumption. It's not a gut feeling. And it's just you change something because it absolutely improved better. And that's something a lot of times that, especially with our kind of clients, they're very much the same in a sense. Different areas in the state, or different areas in the country. All of that, but at the same time, it's a kind of, the users are a very similar mindset when they come to the site. Similar, situations going on when trying to reach out. You can just kind of apply these things across the board, and so it's really fun to do, conversion rate optimization in this sort of setting, just because it's you can help sites all the way across your clients.
And even with, like you said, sometimes it's as simple as changes, right? So you don't have to make radical changes to improve conversion rates of pages, right? I mean, there was an experiment that we did where it was on one website, and the button for the form submission just said submit, right? And they were like, then we changed it to submit for free consultation, right? And just by putting in those type of words, it converts higher. And so just, and the beautiful thing about this is, the insights and data that we learn and test on, like you said, if we do some tests on one law firm's website, you can apply some of the same learnings that you've, learned. And it's not always going to be the same, right?
Right.
But yeah, you do kind of get that benefit.
Yeah, and it's more so, in that, speaking to that point, it's more so just the overall like approach or the effort. So say it's a trust thing, or maybe it's personalization, like the submit, like saying submit my free consultation or something. And a lot of times it's just that, maybe it's not the same verbiage or something like that from site to site. Not all users are the same, but that's still that theory of, personalization has been, we've proven that this works better. Or for instance, another example, we've run a test on a client site that we just, reading through the content, there's so much good information and so many like valuable, pieces of just like content and copy that you want so badly your users to read, but I guarantee you half the time they don't even see it. I know they don't see it just because, in the heat maps, they don't even see that. They don't scroll that far down the page. And so it's that's just getting missed and just completely, you're just leaving it to them to see it. And so sometimes just putting it in front of them, it can increase conversions.
And one of the actions that we took, so to Kate's point, because this was an action that we took, it's, like on mobile, right? As they're scrolling, like they're not going to scroll 7,000 words on mobile, right? They're going to get it. They're going to scroll down. They're going to scan, look at a lot of the H2s. And so what we did was we tested out by putting in direct response, call to actions in between like every 3 paragraphs for mobile. And it improved the actual click-through ratio and phone calls, right? And so now that's part of our, I guess the actual formula that we use. But other things too, like I've noticed, like in one case, we experimented with sometimes lawyers, like on the mobile, it says click to call, right? And testing that versus actually putting a phone number up there. And I think the lessons that we learned is by putting a phone number, it converts a little bit higher than actually just filling out click to call. But like little things like that you would never know. And I think there's probably people that are on this call listening right now, like you're just kind of flying blind, and so that's why we wanted to have this webinar, just so that you can at least start to understand and appreciate this whole other world of not just driving traffic to the website, but like actually analyzing the data and actually trying to make it convert a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I think too, even just with, putting those, like you were saying, the CTAs throughout the site, there's a formula. And then once I think we've gotten to a really good place with our clients where we have this great start that we have had proof that, this works, our SEO efforts are working, we know what we're doing on that end. And then we get there and let's start here. And you just have this template kind of idea that, okay, this is going to work, but it's because every site's different, then we optimize from there. And it's just a really iterative process. And you can test things on certain sites. Like I said, the evidence, or that proof, that trust that you're gonna represent, or that you're gonna call in 24 hours, or anything like that. It works across the board. You just got to cater it to each site. But just having somewhere to start, a baseline, which a lot of, I think, clients don't have. And this is just a really good place to start. And it's a good place to start because it's worked.
Agreed.
Right.
Yep. Completely agree. By the way, guys, we are using the hashtag data dive if you're on this call. If you did jump on late, we are recording this, and this will be going out to anybody that registered. And we covered a lot of good insights already. There's a couple questions that are coming in. I'll just wait to the end for these ones. But if you do have a question, please pop that in there, maybe in the right feed, tell us where you're actually calling in from. Would love to know that. And I think we have just a couple more slides, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, Brandon, if you want to go to the next one.
This is how we do it. Montel Jordan, this is how we do
That's
it.
exactly what I sang in my head when I created this one. So yeah, this is it's kind of like, don't worry if you don't understand it. I try to just show you like the process, that it starts like way before I even touch anything. So it starts with dev team and development and all that. We get then HR will send out HR sends out like the client information, and then we kind of just, that's when we get the who, what, where. Like they've done their due diligence, giving us these things, the client's main KPIs, all of that, and then we take that knowledge and we go and apply it to the data. We start digging in, we start content grouping. Sometimes we do forecasting. One of our other colleagues, she'll run this report, and it gives us a forecast of like how traffic is going to fluctuate or what's going to happen after we do this rebuild. And then having all that data is so important for conversion rate optimization because you have history, right, of the site. So it's just the more knowledge you have, the better. So we'll start going through, and then I'll start, just kind of going through a site as if I was the user, and you put yourself in their shoes. And that's when I go to Brandon and I'll start like just making a list of tags I want. Like, oh, I would click this if I was actually searching for something, and then I find out it's not clickable. So these are things I'm like, I wonder how many other people are doing this. And it's just this really intuitive, thoughtful process that a lot of times isn't a lot to show for as far as like client goes. But it's something that it's so important that you have this data so that you can later on go test. So event tracking and just going through, getting your heat map set up, getting your tools set up. If you're going to test, optimize, it's free. There's a million tools, and a lot of them are great, but a lot of them, are really expensive. And so a lot of people are like, well, what if I don't want to financially put that much effort in? You don't really have to, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of free tools out there too that you want CRO, insights are important. So you've got to put in a little bit, but
that's right.
Yeah. So even if you don't A/B test, I think in this process, it starts to get to the hypothesis list. So you do all this like work of session recordings, content grouping, auditing. Brandon does his work as well, like in this whole process. And it's just, you have all this information and you're like, okay, so then I would go and do this. And you create this hypothesis list saying, I think because of this data, you have like back supporting evidence of your hypothesis. And then you give reasonings, and maybe you have session recordings or heat maps. And then you create this list and you create mock-ups, and that's when you can start testing. But the testing is only because you've already done the work, right? So for people that think they can't test, you can still have all this information. Like even if your site doesn't have enough traffic, there is still so much gold in your data to find and still learn so much. And you can still optimize and still test. Statistical significance is a real thing. And it basically says, if I reach 95%, that means you only have 5% left up to chance. Like there's only 5% that this actually happened by random chance. So you feel really good about implementing a change, say a button color, if you will. But rarely do sites have enough traffic to actually test button colors. E-commerce sites, that's a different story, but lead gen, it's just a little different. So
unless you're spending a lot of money on paid traffic, right? Because you can force it, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So there's everything's different, and there's always stipulations. But there's bottom line, you don't have to test to do CRO. CRO is so much more than that. It's really understanding how your business works and your users are working, and then how you're marketing to them, and if they're liking it, and if they're receiving that well. And it's just an iterative process, and you've got to be willing to take a chance and see if it works. And it's experimentation, but it's really valuable.
That's right. Yep. So obviously you can see there's a lot to this, right? And it's not something that we can cover on just one 1 hour, 60-minute webinar, right? There's so much that kind of goes into this. And once you get to the end, guess what? You're starting over again, right?
Yeah,
There's
every time.
running, right? So, that's how this all works. Was there anything else you wanted to cover on this slide?
I think this was the last. Yeah, this is the last one.
This is the last slide. Okay, so you covered it. We do have some questions, and again, if you do have questions, now's the time. Pop that in there. We'll take them. All right. So the first question: what are some common false positives or false negatives that you see in analytics and CRO test?
Well, for me, it's stopping a test too early. So that's automatically, a lot of times people will stop a test. I hope I'm answering this right, but, because, with the variation's doing great. It's already at 95%, and it's only been 3 days. And it's just it's random. You absolutely cannot trust that.
Sample size is too small, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's just, the data is going to fluctuate for a good while before it's even trustworthy. So it's like, that's just not even look, because you get your hopes up. But yeah, that's always, a lot of people will stop a test soon because they think it's a win or
Mhm.
whatever. And so that'll just, and it's actually, it later on down the line, say 3 months, their conversion rate's actually tanking.
Yeah. And I think another, we talked briefly about one of the false positives, is, when either traffic rises but the conversion rate doesn't follow, right? And it just could be, Google is always, they're doing experimentation, right? Again, you might have ended up on the first page of Google nationally for a term like car accident lawyer, and you were there for like a day, right? And all of a sudden you got all this influx of traffic, but people aren't looking for an accident lawyer in Miami, right? So like that, Google like will do that. They'll test things out, and because of the popularity of your website, you might start to pop for terms that aren't necessarily relevant to you. And that's another thing too. Like oftentimes when the SEO starts to work, some of the old content that you wrote years ago for maybe mass tort drugs that are no longer around anymore, right? There's no cases, active cases. And all of a sudden you start popping up on the first page of Google and people start calling you because of that. Like I've seen that too. And it's like, whoa, we haven't covered this mass tort case in forever. Why are we getting so many of these phone calls? Well, it's just because an old page of content popped up on the first page of Google because of all the link building and technical SEO that you've been doing. So sometimes those are, false positives and false negatives, I guess. Anything to add, Brandon?
Oh, no. I think you guys covered it all.
Great. All right, let's see here. How do I know what to do if I'm small and will never have enough data to make an informed decision? So, I'm a small player, I don't get a lot of traffic. What can I do? I think the first thing that you could do is you could experiment with paid traffic. That's certainly something that you could do. And you don't have to go after a lot of like the $200 per click, right? You can go after some of the smaller keywords to try to experiment, just to drive traffic to a website to see how well it's going to convert. Anything else to add?
Kate, are you still on for audio?
Looks like something happened with her bandwidth. So.
A few of the things like she was saying, like user testing would work even if you had a small amount of traffic. Looking at the baseline report for conversion rate, because no matter how few visits you're getting, you're still going to have a real conversion rate. So like you may not be able to do the testing and stuff like that, as she mentioned before, but you can still look at user behavior of those people coming to the site, things like that. And I think she's jumping back on, but that's where the heat maps, session recordings, and stuff like that really come into play, because you have 10 visitors, you can still have 10 session recordings and look at that.
Sure. Can't hear you, Kate.
I think she's dialing in.
Oh, got it. Okay. All right, let's see here. So here's a question. Sometimes you have a whole office that let's just say it's a law firm and they've got 200 people in the office, and people are going to the website all day long, right? And it kind of is throwing off the analytics because it looks like you're getting a whole bunch of like direct traffic. Is there things that you can do to filter out that type of traffic?
Yes. So before COVID, when everybody was in a single office, we would just block the different locations. So you jump into analytics, you'd see 5 filters, like this is our Miami location, this is the Texas one, things like that. And it was really easy. But now we have hundreds of employees spread around the country. They're working in coffee shops, inside, outside their house. It's too many IPs for me to, I'm not going in there and adding all those filters, because then we have to change them. And I'm oftentimes behind multiple IP addresses because of VPNs.
Yes.
What we recommend for that is using something like the Google Analytics opt-out tool. It's a Chrome plugin for Google Chrome. I know that Firefox has a few blocking things. So basically, you're just blocking yourself from being recorded in analytics. I love the Chrome tool because it allows you to put in a list of websites. So we can put in, all of our client sites, and then it just blocks us. And if we need to do some dev testing to make sure it's working, we can just click and turn it off. But yeah, smaller teams can definitely exclude their IP addresses, but plugins and stuff like that really do help with blocking yourself. Now, Google Search Console, this comes up a lot. I know that our paid media director will tell you, don't search and click on your ads to the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Well, organically searching for yourself over and over and over again also causes a problem. One thing that I like to do is add UTM parameters to bookmarks for all the client URLs. So if you bookmark the URL and you click through, it shows up as direct, and we don't worry too much about that. But even 100 people doing that can cause spikes in direct traffic. So if you bookmark a UTM, then you can go in and just add a filter to exclude all the people coming through that source medium.
Got it. I can see you, Kate. I'm not sure if we can hear you. No voice still. Something's up. No big deal. This is our first webinar, guys. Bear with us here. Like, we knew we were going to run into some technology problems.
I think the question too. Can we click on this?
Oh, so what is the here's a question. Like, what do you think the biggest mistake that people make with analytics and or conversion rate optimization?
Yes. Ooh, the biggest mistake.
The biggest mistake, yes.
I can think of lots of mistakes. What would be the biggest one? Jason. Jason just went out. If you can,
I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Jason's back. Sorry, it scared me. All right. So one of the biggest mistakes is not starting off small. So like when we go into a new client's analytics property, sometimes things are so bad that I recommend just restarting the analytics account. So I would say start limited before you start doing the bigger stuff and make sure that works. So just adding analytics to the site, making sure it's working, then moving to your goals. And then once you get those and you're on a solid footing, then go in and start adding stuff like event tracking, custom dimensions, and those types of things. Having a test view is something that we didn't mention in this webinar, but like Jason just asked about the filtering out stuff. When you add a filter, you permanently alter your traffic that's going into analytics. So one time we've seen somebody who wanted to add an exclusion filter that only included their host name. So we have, Hennessey.com, and let's say we were worried about people spamming us. So we're like, okay, let's just include Hennessey.com. Well, maybe they accidentally clicked exclude. So now the only traffic that's coming into the site or into your analytics property is the spam traffic. So that would be another one of the bigger mistakes, is not testing traffic altering things on a test view before you put it on your main view. Another
mistake that I just wanted to mention, and I think we could probably end it with this one here, is, there's different canonical versions of URLs, right? So yes. You have, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, like when they're setting up their analytics or their search console, is you have like an HTTPS version of URL, right, with the SSL certificate. You have an old one that's HTTP. You have, versions that have www dots. You have versions that don't have www dot, right? And so in most cases, a lot of those URLs are actually redirecting to one canonical URL. But in terms of like setting up analytics, like, is there some, is there any like warnings with that for somebody that might be listening?
Yes, there's all kinds of cool stuff we can do. Okay, so we didn't cover this in this call, but at the last company I worked for before Hennessey, we did a lot of error tracking. So what we would do is we put listeners inside of another reason to use Google Tag Manager, because it's easy to put in a little snippet that just listens for JavaScript errors, and we send those to Google Analytics. We did the same thing for files that showed up missing. And one of the things that we eventually want to start doing is recording the protocol of the page that loads. So what we would do is we put in a variable in Google Tag Manager, which just grabs the HTTP or HTTPS from the beginning of the URL, and then we fire that as a custom dimension. So if you had alerts or you wanted to just create a report that got emailed to you every time you saw one of those sessions, you could look at everybody that came to the site that saw an HTTP, and you can also look at the source medium that referred them there. So then you can track down, hey, who's sending people to this page? Because you want to fix those links, and then you also want to fix your internal redirect so that those HTTP pages don't actually load. They redirect properly.
Yeah. And you'll get, like, even, I know we're talking mostly about analytics, but with Search Console, if you have that set up correctly, like sometimes you'll get notifications saying, hey, for whatever reason, your non-HTTPS version of your website is recording traffic all of a sudden, right? And it's like, well, what happened, right? And so Google might have indexed the wrong canonical of the URL, and now you might have duplicate pages that have the same content that is causing a much bigger issue, right? And so it's so important that you are aware that you only want one canonical version of your URL, whether it's HTTP. In this day and age, everything should always be HTTPS. If you don't have HTTPS, I say leave the webinar right now and go take care of that. That's a very important thing. But some people might include the www, other people might not, right? But you have to choose one, and so you can't have both. You don't want two URLs propagating because it causes all kinds of problems. So that's a big aha from this webinar. Well, this has been awesome, Brandon. I always learn a lot whenever you and Kate get on these calls, and I take the time to kind of just sit and listen instead of talking, which I do a lot. And so thank you very much, both of you. I know we had some problems with Kate, her Wi-Fi, but I think it was a really amazing webinar. We're going to be doing these once a month. In fact, we're building our studio. I'm heading there right now. We're building Hennessey Studios in Hollywood, California. And so my background might be a little different on the next webinar here, but it's okay. It's COVID edition, right? Everybody's used to dogs barking and kids running in and all of that stuff. But again, if you were tuning in and you joined late, we are recording this. We'll be sending this out. We don't have the exact date of the next webinar yet, but we will be sure to alert you. We have everybody's email address. Brandon, thank you so much, man.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And with that being said, thank you for joining, and we will see you next time.